Hello everyone, this is Marjorie B. Rivera, and today I'm going to discuss the history of English in the Philippines. But before that, I'm going to give you some overview of my presentation. Okay, let's start. In the 16th century, Spain claimed the Philippines for its own. The Spanish introduced the Christianity to the Philippines. Many friars and priests were sent by the crown to teach Christianity and their language to the Filipino people. However, most of the friars and priests abused their power and overruled the country. When the Filipinos insisted on having equal rights with the rest of the Spanish people and were not given them, they rebelled against the Spanish government and set up their own republic. The new Republic of the Philippines did not last long until American occupation began. So to know more about our history, let's now proceed to my presentation. When and who introduced or brought the language in the Philippines? The first significant exposure of Filipino to the English language occurred in 1762 when the British invaded Manila, but this was a brief episode that had no lasting influence. English later became more important and widespread during the American occupation and remained as our official language. Next, how English language spread in the Philippines. The English widespread in the Philippines during the American occupation. The Filipino revolutionists won against the Spaniards who colonized for more than 300 years. June 12, 1898 raised the Philippine flag as a symbol of our independence. General Emilio Aguinaldo was elected the first president of the Philippines Republic, but this was short-lived. A new group started to write in English. Hence, Spanish, Tagalog, the vernaculars, and finally English, were the medium used in literature during these times. The writers in Spanish were wont to write on nationalism like honoring Rizal and other heroes. The writers in Tagalog continued in their lamentation on the condition of the country and their attempts to arouse love for one's native tongue. The writers in English imitated the themes and method of the Americans. In that way, education became a very important issue for the United States colonial government, since it allowed it to spread their cultural values, particularly the English language, to the Filipino people. It was 1898 during the time of President McKinley that the American duty is to educate, civilize, and Christianize the Filipinos so that they would be fitting of citizenship. Let's proceed to the status of English in the Philippines. What is the status of English as a second language in the Philippines? English is the dominant language of print media, while broadcast media, as TV and radio stations, shows a rapid expansion of the domain of Filipino by Dayag 2004. PE is the language of educated Filipino. It is the type of English that is acceptable in educated Filipino circles, and it should therefore be distinguished from creolized forms of English and the type of English which simply mixes Tagalog and English. While American sounds and idioms have become the norm for call centers and FM radio, all other language-based institutions have resisted the so-called foreign sounds, with some educators even considering the standardization of Philippine English for academic purposes. How many speakers? The Philippines is made up of a population of some 72 million people who together speak some 85 Malayo-Polynesian language like Tagalog, Cebuana, Ilocano, Hiligaynon, Waray, and Bicol on some 7,000 islands by region El Rimo. Next, what is the current rank of Philippines in the International Proficiency Index? In 1937, the use of Tagalog, renamed Filipino and later Filipino, became widespread so that the latest census or National Statistic Office 2000 indicate that more than 85% of Filipinos now speak at least a colloquial variety of this language. According to Tita C. Valderrama 2019, published by the Manila Times, The Philippines fall from 14th place in 2018 and 20th place in the 2019 English Proficiency Index. How is English language education implemented? In 1987 Constitution Article 14 under Section 6, the national language of the Philippines is Filipino. As it evolves, it shall be further developed and enriched on the basis existing Philippine and other languages. Subject to the provisions of law and as the Congress may deem appropriate, the government shall take steps to initiate and sustain the use of Filipino as a medium of communication and as language of instruction in the educational system. Under Section 7, for purpose of communication and instruction, the official language of the Philippines are Filipino, and until otherwise provided by law, English. The regional language are the auxiliary official languages in the regions and shall serve as auxiliary media of instruction therein. The Spanish and Arabic shall be promoted on a voluntary and optional basis. And next is the implementation of bilingual education, which emphasizes the importance of English and Filipino in education and as our official language. Next, what are the programs for the improvement of English proficiency? First thing in my list is watch movies in English. As we watch movies in English, we learn various vocabulary and adapt some of it that will help to improve or increase our knowledge. Next is engage yourself in reading English language news. By reading English, we get some idea and techniques of writer that we can use in everyday lives. Next is read vocabulary in the books like dictionary, encyclopedia, etc. that will increase our level of competence. And the last is talk with friends and family in English because we learn the language by using it. The mastery of language is very important to learn the language. What are the language policies affecting English language use? Assimilation policies. A policies of assimilation is one that uses measures to accelerate the downsizing of one or more linguistic minority group or groups. The ultimate goal of such policies is to foster national unity inside the state, based on the idea that a single language in the country will favor that end. Non-intervention policies. A policy on non-intervention consists in choosing to allow the normal rapport between the main linguistic group and the minorities evolve on its own. This almost invariably favors the dominant group. Sometimes such policies are accompanied by administrative measures protecting certain minorities. Differentiated legal statute policies. A policy that recognizes a different legal statute for a given language usually aims at allowing the coexistence of multiple linguistic groups inside a state. Typically, the majority has all its linguistic rights secured and sometimes promoted while the minority or minorities are given special protection for their language. Valorization of the official language policies. A policy favoring the official language is a policy of unilingualism. Sometimes it favors the or a national language. Sometimes it favors a colonial language with a strong influence internationally. In some cases, such policies are accompanied by measuring, recognizing, and protecting minority language or indigenous language. This approach may be considered in two broadly different types of situations, where the official language is also the first language of the majority of population and where it is not. And the last is sectorial policies. There are two types of sectorial policies. First is the bilingualism or trilingualism policies. A policy favoring the two official language is a policy of bilingualism. There are three rights. First is based on non-territorialized individual rights, which recognize the same rights to all members of a community whatever their location on the national territory. Next is based on territorialized individual rights, which recognize the same rights to all members of a community within a specific region. And last is based on territorial rights, which recognize the same rights to all members of a community within a specific territory. And the second types of sectorial policies is strategic multilingualism policies, which is based on non-territorialized individual rights, which recognize the same rights to all members of a community, whatever their location on the national territory. How is the attitude of the people towards English? According to Gardner and Lambert, 1972, they emphasize that the attitude learners possess positive attitude towards the language they intend to learn. It seems that the second language learners benefits a lot when they possess a positive attitude. Features of English language in the Philippines. What is the distinct features in terms of grammar, pronunciation, etc.? English was made the language of the education. As its use extended, it became indigenized through the inclusion of vocabulary from local language, the adoption of English words to local needs, and modification in pronunciation and grammar. And last, local author who wrote in English. Nick Joaquin or Nicomedes Marquez Joaquin was a Filipino writer and journalist best known for his short stories and novels in the English language. He also wrote using the pen name Quijano de Manila. Joaquin was conferred the rank and title of National Artist of the Philippines for Literature. He has been considered one of the most important Filipino writers along with Jose Rizal and Claro M. Recto, unlike Rizal and Recto whose work were written in Spanish. Joaquin's major works were written in English despite being a native Spanish speaker. Therefore, we can summarize the history of English in the Philippines in three periods. First is the period of reorientation. English as a literary vehicle came with the American occupation in August 13, 1898, as they say, a choice bestowed on us by history. By 1900, English came to be used as a medium of instruction in the public school. From the American forces were recruited the first teacher of English. By 1908, the primary and intermediate grades were using English. Second, the period of imitation. By 1919, the UP College Folio published the literary composition of the first Filipino writer in English. They were the pioneers in short story writing. They were then grouped their way into imitating American and British models, which resulted in a stilted, artificial, and unnatural style, lacking vitality and spontaneity. And the last period of self-discovery and growth. By this time, Filipino writers had acquired the mastery of English writing. They now confidently and competently wrote on a lot of subjects, although the old-time favorites of love and youth persisted. They went into all forms of writing like the novel and the drama. Thank you for listening. See you next time, guys.